we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a photo gallery, and this is going to be basically pretty much all controlled by CSS. Let me just introduce you to what our file looks like, and we'll talk a little bit about the code behind it. This is what my page looks like with some very minimal styles applied to it, and I'll show you what those are shortly. So basically I have a series of images that have been added in, and you can see how they're just stacking one on top of the other. Nothing is very compelling about this, and it certainly visually is not very interesting here on the page. I have a header tag, and then I just went ahead and made a footer inside my HTML just to kind of like finish this page off. So if we look at our code, you can see what's going on here. Basically, I have a link to an external style sheet. We'll be using an external style sheet since this file is going to use more extensive styles than what we've used in the past. We're also going to be reusing these styles in a later exercise to create a more complex website. So they'll be all set up for us to use later on. So it's pointing to my style sheet, and I'll show you that in just a moment. Let's just look at the code. The code is super simple. I basically, inside my body tag, I have a div which I have an ID assigned to it of right column gallery, and inside that div I have my h3 tag, and then I basically have my images, and they are just a series of images that have been added in here. Each image is going to go ahead and it has a class assigned to it. So I've made classes of gPic-H for gallery pick horizontal, because I have both horizontal and vertical images that I want to display, and I want this gallery to look really nice for both types of images. And then I basically have my next image has a class of gPic-V, which stands for gallery pick vertical, and I just alternate my horizontal and vertical images throughout, and you can see that I just have a series of images that I've basically placed on the page. The last thing I have is this div right here is basically just encasing the div ID of right column gallery, is encasing all my images. The last thing I have on my page is a div that encases the footer information, and I just have the name of the sushi restaurant, and then I close my body and my HTML. So if we scroll down, you can see the footer is basically just this, gray bar with some white text that's a little bit smaller. So that's basically what we're going to be working with. Let's take a quick look at the CSS so we can see what we're starting with. As I mentioned, in this exercise we'll be working with an external style sheet, so we pretty much aren't going to be touching the HTML file very much. We'll just be working with our CSS. And I have a global style that basically takes away the margin and the padding, and that's why everything is right up here close to the left and to the top of my web page. I have a class, a style assigned to my div of right column gallery that's just specifying the width, and it's giving it a background color of white. I have a style that's attached to my h3 tag, which is just specifying font size, font color, a bottom margin, aligning the text to the right, and a little bit of padding to push it away from the right edge of our div. And then I have styles assigned to my footer, and these are things that you're all familiar with: width, background color, font family, font size, color, aligning my text to the right, and some padding to push it, and a little bit of margin to push it away from the page, and also so that when we scroll down to the bottom of the page, there's a little bit of space underneath the footer and the bottom of the page, and that's what the margin is doing. Okay, let's go ahead and let's get started. Let's create a beautiful gallery, and you're going to really be amazed what we end up transforming this into. It's going to be really more interesting and well laid out page. The first thing that I have, just to create a little bit of interest, is I have a image that I'm going to go ahead and assign to the background of my overall page. So I'm just going to go ahead and put that on the body, and I don't think we've done this yet, but you can basically use a background image if it's a tiling image, and I just have a tiny little image that I'm going to be using. It's very small, like maybe, I don't remember exactly, but it's definitely under 20 by 20 pixels, and I'm going to use this, and it's going to tile and repeat across my page and create just kind of a nice look for the rest of our page. So from here, I need to go up one directory into my images folder, and my image is called bg_hline for horizontal lines.gif, and it's just a teeny tiny little thing. So if I go ahead and I save this and we refresh the page, you can see that now I have this background that repeats. Okay, now my right column gallery div has a width value assigned to it and a background color of white, so that's why it's going to display with this white background, but you can see that this horizontal little line is now repeating, so that's going to kind of frame my page a little bit. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and specify my font, and I'm just going to go ahead and throw that in here in my right column gallery. I'm not using too many fonts here, but I'm going to go ahead and assign the font family overall, so if I decide to have any paragraphs later or anything like that, I can go ahead and specify what I want them to be, and I'm just going to use Verdana, and if that's not available, I'll use the user's default sans serif font. And the next thing that I want to do is on my page, I'd like my gallery to kind of be center aligned. You can see how by default it's staying on the left side of the page. So we want to center align this so it stays, this whole right column gallery div is going to center align on the page. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do that in here as well. I'll go ahead and add a style to right column gallery, and to center align something, you're going to use the margin left, and you're going to set it to auto, which is not very intuitive, but this is how you can center align something on the page. And then you're going to set your margin right also to auto. So if we save our page and view in the browser now, you can see that now this div is going to float in the center of my page, which is exactly what I want. So now I've achieved that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a little bit of padding to the right and to the left and to the top of this div just to give it some breathing room. So we'll come back in here and I'm going to go ahead and specify a padding left of 40 pixels. I'm going to specify a padding right of, let's use 20 pixels. And I'm going to do a padding on the top of 40 pixels as well. So if we save and refresh, you can now see that I've just added some space all the way around, a little bit of breathing room. That kind of frees everything up here a little bit. I've already accommodated in the width of my div for the padding that I wanted to add, so now you can see that the width of this is pretty much the same as the footer. We need to center align the footer. Let's just go ahead and add the margin left and right to our footer div down here. So I don't have that set yet. I'll just go ahead and specify that, and we'll save and refresh our page. And now you can see that these line up perfectly and they're both going to stay centered on the page. So that's starting to look good. Now let's go ahead and let's tackle what to do with some of these images. So that's our next step right here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create some styles for the classes that I was telling you about that are already assigned to my images. So each image has a class assigned to it, either gpic_h for the horizontal images or gpic_v for my vertical images. So let's go ahead and let's make styles for those. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to come down here and I'm going to type gpic_h. We'll start with that one, and I need to make sure that I'm case sensitive to how I actually named these particular classes. So gpic_h is what I called it, and I'm going to go ahead and specify a border, and I'm just going to have a 1 pixel border. It's going to be a solid line, and I'm going to go ahead and use a hex value that I've used elsewhere on my page. It's actually being used in the footer div. It's kind of like a dark gray. So if I go ahead and refresh, you can now see how all of my horizontal pictures now have a border around them. Okay, so that's my first step. I'm going to come back here and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give these images some width and height values. So I'm going to set the width equal to, I want each of my images to take up basically 200 pixels. So I need a minus 2 pixels because I have border on right and left. So we'll set the width to 198. And for my horizontal images, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use a height value of 169 pixels. And I'm going to go ahead and set margins. So I'm going to use a margin on the bottom of 12 pixels, and this is to give spacing around my divs. I'm going to also do a margin on the right. And my margin right is also going to be 12 pixels. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pad the top of this div to be 54 pixels. Now, I'm just not randomly pulling these numbers out of a hat. I basically have gone ahead and designed how I wanted my page to look. I basically want the boxes that are going to accommodate my pictures. My pictures are going to be framed in these boxes to be 200 pixels wide and 225 pixels high. So if we add 54 to 169, that gives us 223 plus 2, because I have border on top and bottom, that gives me the 225. So you can see how now that all of the horizontal images on my gallery are now framed in this box. I would like to center align the content, so I'm going to go ahead and use a text align center. And I'm going to go ahead and set that to center, and this will basically just center the images in there. So those are now looking pretty good. Perfect. Alrighty, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make similar styles for my vertical pictures. So we'll go ahead and we'll set up the style, the class name, which is going to be, it's a class so it has to start with a period, dot gpicv for gallery pick vertical. And I'm going to go ahead and set up very similar styles to what we just used. You'll see that some of the numbers, of course, are going to change because the images themselves are a different aspect ratio. But a lot of these values are going to be very similar to what we just did. Using the same border, I'm going to go ahead and define the height. So the height of this is going to be different. The height of this is going to be 214 pixels, and my width is going to be the same, 198. So if I save and refresh, you can now see that I start to get a border around my vertical images as well. We need to go ahead and center align the images and add a little spacing, and obviously create some spacing between the actual images themselves. So we'll go ahead and we'll continue on with our styles. I'm going to go ahead and use a margin on the bottom of 12 pixels, same as we did before. And I'll use a margin on the right of 12 pixels, same as we did for the other ones above. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set the padding on the top. And this is going to be a different value here because these images are set to a different size. I'm only going to use a padding top of 9 pixels because if I add 9 to 214 plus my 2, that's going to give me my 225. So I don't need to have as much padding because these images are much taller and they don't need the same. And then I'll center align those as well. So now if we save and we refresh, you can see that now these have their own little framed boxes. Did I not do padding top? Oh, I just have X, I guess. CSS doesn't know that I meant pixels. All right, there we go. Now we have a little bit of spacing there. So that's starting to look much better. You can see how I've created these nice little frames for all of the images that are being used in my gallery. Now I don't want my images just stacking on top of each other like this. I'd like them to appear side by side. So that's easy enough to do. All I need to do is assign a float on each of these. So we'll go ahead and do that next. I'm going to go ahead and use a float value left, and we'll put that on both the vertical and the horizontal pictures. So if we save now and we refresh, you can see what basically has happened is it does float our images, but what the heck happened to our background? Why is our, the background color now this gray? Well, I have some problems because I'm floating images. Okay, and we know that when you float images, if we look back here in our HTML, I'm floating images basically inside my right column gallery div. You can see how the header is displaying with the white background as specified. It is taking on the settings that we specified, but then it basically ignores the style, and that's because all of this content is floated left. And basically, CSS does not like to deal with this floated left. So I can solve this problem really easily. All I basically need to do is I need to go ahead and I need to create a clear. So if we create our clear down here, so if I do a div with a class of clear, and I'll go ahead and just put a comment in here so the browser knows that I mean business. Now I'll close my div. So I'm going to save my page. I'm going to come back to my CSS, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a style for clear. So I'm just going to say dot clear, and what do I want to do here? Well, I want to clear both. So I'll go ahead and type clear, and we'll set it to both. So if I save and refresh, you can see that that does help. Obviously the footer is now more in control and more where we want it to be. It's at the bottom and it doesn't just take up the space. But what the heck happened to the white background? Well, it's basically ignoring the white background because once again it sees the header and then it's ignoring everything else that's floated. So to fix this problem, I just need to make sure that I have my clear in the right spot. Instead of outside of the right column gallery div, I actually need it to be right on the inside because I basically need to tell I need to clear after this floated image right here. So if I save and we refresh the page now, you're going to see now I get what I want. I get my white background, all my images are where they need to be, and this page is definitely looking really nice. You can see how just with a little bit of CSS, we've really improved how this image is actually looking, and we've made a really beautiful gallery page. I'm going to just add one more thing to my CSS that I think will enhance the page. I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to go ahead and assign, I'd like to have a really thin border just appearing right against my images. So we can do that easily enough. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to make a CSS rule for G pick H image. So I want all image tags that are located inside G pick H, as well as all images that are located inside G pick V, and that are images. So this is going to be what I want to specify, and then all I need to do is come in here and I'm going to set the border, and the border is going to be 1 pixel. It's going to be solid, and it's going to have a light gray value. So if I save and refresh, you can see how now each of my images have a really nice light gray. Now you don't see it on some of the images that are dark up to the edge, but the ones that have the lighter backgrounds, it really frames them well. It did actually add it to all of them. It's just not as noticeable on some of these images that are darker on the edge. But basically, this is it. We've created a beautiful gallery just using some CSS, a photo gallery, and I can basically just continue to put as many images as I want in here, and I think that you'll agree that this is a much more compelling page than what we started with, and basically it's all been styled utilizing CSS. So I think that you will find this technique useful and you'll be able to utilize it in web pages, and of course it doesn't have to be used just like this, but it is a great effect. I think I'm hungry now and I need to go eat.